Hello, YouTubers, and welcome to Level-Headed News. This is your host, Brenda. I have 15 articles for you here this morning. All the URLs are in the description of the video for your convenience. I will start this off by saying if you missed my special edition I did last night about Ammon Bundy, you might want to pull that up, especially if for no other reason insane what's going on. So the more of us that sign this, maybe the more attention it will get. But I'll get into this morning's articles. The first one I have here is off the Conservative Tribune, and it says, government expert just connected all the North Korean dots. This isn't good. While there has been quite a bit of attention focused on North Korea's illicit ballistic missile and nuclear weapons programs, one expert thinks the media pundits have been overlooking an important connection of capabilities in order to downplay the threat of a potentially devastating attack homeland. Dr. Peter Vincent Pry is the Chief of Staff of the Congressional Mission and Executive Director of the Task Force on National and Homeland Security. He is convinced that North Korea already possesses the ability to strike the U.S. not with a conventional missile-based nuclear warhead, but one carried by a satellite that above the atmosphere to produce an electromagnetic pulse effects on our technologically based society. In a recent interview with Breitbart's Aaron Klein, that media pundits and government officials were focusing too much on North Korea's lack of a proven long-range intercontinental ballistic missile, atmospheric re-entry vehicle, and miniaturized nuclear warhead, none of which would be needed to detonate an EMP over the U.S. Link in this article says Pry wrote of an old plan by the former Soviet Union, now believed to have been shared with the North Koreans, to launch a disabling EMP strike against the U.S. using Earth-orbiting satellite-based warheads in advance of a more conventional nuclear strike. While North Korea may indeed be incapable of the second stage follow-up attack of that plan, they most certainly have the capability to sequence events. Are positioning themselves, and it's got something trying to play here that stopped. It says the North Koreans are positioning themselves as sort of a nuclear missile age, cyber age version of the battleship diplomacy, in my view, Pry explained, so that they can always have one of them, meaning the satellites, very close to being over the United States or over the United States. Then if a crisis comes up, and if we decide to attack North Korea, Kim Jong-un can threaten our president and say, well, don't do that because we're going to burn your whole country down, which is basically what he said, Pry continued. I mean, he has made threats about turning the United States into ashes, and he connected the satellite program to this in public statements to deter us from attacking. Of the old Soviet plan, Pry remarked how the Soviet satellites were specifically positioned to orbit the Earth so as to approach the U.S. from the south, which is woefully unguarded against any sort of strike from that direction. During the Cold War, and even today, we still don't have ballistic missile early radar warnings looking south, Pry said. We don't have any national missile defenses to the south. To the south. We can't see anything coming from that direction. Then, when this gets over the United States, you light it off so that it does an EMP attack. It would likely have targeted military and strategic command targets in advance of follow-up volleys of nuclear ICBMs. It lacks the follow-up capability, so its EMP would likely have a different focus. Mainly going for is unhardened electric grid, Pry guesstimated, transportation, communications, all of the other civilian critical infrastructure that we depend on to keep our population alive. Pry penned a recent op-ed for Newsmax in which he pointed out that the most recent North Korean missile test, a failure after the missile detonated in midair shortly after launch, and a great success given the detonation occurred at the optimal height EMP blast. Dr. Pry has been warning about how vulnerable our nation is to an EMP attack for quite some time, but his dire warnings have gone largely unheeded or been dismissed and ignored. The most recent sobering assessment of how close North Korea may actually be to having the capability to land it against the U.S. homeland will finally garner the attention it truly deserves. The next article of World Israel News. And I'm waiting for the hamster to get it up here on the screen for me. Stopped for, I don't know. Come on. I see the wheel spinning, so he's in there. I'm going to have to goose him, I think. Goose him with a pointy stick. He's taking his time. Okay, it's starting to come up here now. Turkey's president rips into Israel, tells Muslims to swarm Temple Mount. We can get it to scroll up a little bit. Taking his time about that too. He's an independent little cuss, ain't he? Come on, hamster. Slanderous attack on the Jewish state. Turkish President Erdogan accused Israel of racism, warned Trump against moving the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem, and called on Muslims to flood the Temple Mount. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan Israel try that again, in an Istanbul speech Monday. And the Temple Mount. Bemoaning an Israeli presence, he called on Muslims from around the world to flood the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Every day that Jerusalem is under occupation is an insult to Muslims, said Erdogan. Would be the greatest support there. Israel's plan to curb the volume of the Islamic calls to prayer with announced Muezzin. It's shameful that this issue is even on the agenda, he stated. And for some reason, it's jumping around a little bit here, so let me calm this down. So, the fact that those who talked about freedom of thought even approved this measure by remaining silent is noteworthy. We will not allow the silence of prayers from Jerusalem. To regulate the often ear-splitting Muslim call to prayer known as the, again, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, it's Muezzin, Muezzin, hours of the morning, has raised hackles among Muslims who contend that the measure amounts to an assault on their freedom of religion. Warned the Trump administration not to move its embassy to Jerusalem. It is wrong, he said. Such a plan. And let's see if we can get scroll up a little bit more. Israel responds and calls Erdogan a human rights abuser. Foreign ministry responded by calling Erdogan a violator of human rights. Those who systematically violate human rights in their own country should not preach to the only true democracy in the region, said a written statement released soon after Erdogan's tirade. Israel consistently protects total freedom of worship for Jews, Muslims, and Christians, and will continue to do so despite the baseless slander launched against it, the statement said. Has had a checkered relationship with Israel. Ties between Israel and Turkey, which were once close, have significantly deteriorated since the Mavi Marwa incident in 2010. Activists, in an effort to defy Israeli sovereignty and breach the naval blockade of Gaza, boarded a flotilla of Turkish vessels, falsely claiming to be bringing humanitarian aid and medical supplies to the Strip. Boarded the ship and were viciously assaulted with knives and other weapons. In the scuffle that followed, 10 Turkish nationals were killed and several IDF soldiers were wounded. The signing of the reconciliation pact in 2016, the relationship remains shaky. And I think that's the end of that article. Okay, so we can get the hamster to dance his little dance. Okay, the next one is off of minds.com. And it says massive looting and violence, protests across Mexico over 20% rise in gas price. I don't know how I managed to miss this news from 4 months ago, but I bet you didn't hear either. In January of 2017, the price of gas in Mexico increased 20%. Said the price hike is part of a plan to gradually cede control of the fuel market to private development as part of government deregulation of the energy sector. Pena Nieto said it was a necessary move to reflect higher global prices. Mexicans reacted with violent demonstrations and looting. One was protests. Protesters blocked highways and petrol stations across the country. Demonstrations in the northern city of Monterrey turned violent on January the 5th, tried to force their way into the government palace, smashing stained glass windows and some pepper spray. After the fifth day of unrest, which had spread to at least 14 Mexico's, at least 987 people were arrested. Number two was the looting. Looters ransacked at least 250 stores across Mexico. Walmart suddenly walked away with big ticket items like big screen TVs. In this article, if you want to see it. Walmart de Mexico SAB, Chedraui SAB, Grupo Electra, and organization Serena SAB stores were among those targeted in a wave of anger. Fuel price hike, looting, preemptive store closings, and truck robberies were widely reported on social media since the night of January 3rd. 3 people were killed amidst looting in the eastern state of on January the 5th, while a police officer was killed on January the 4th while trying to prevent robberies at a gas station in Mexico City. Latam SAB, a real estate investment company, said in a filing that 2 malls in which it has a controlling stake on January 4th and 5th. The company is working with local and federal authorities to protect the locations and the people who work there. And Todd, the Mexican Retailers Association, said government efforts haven't been enough to calm situation. Says, bear in mind that Mexicans are not starving. About gas prices. Imagine what they do if the Mexican economy collapses and the people are starving, like the Venezuelans in their crumbling socialist utopia, losing an average of 19 pounds last year on a starvation diet of 1 or 2 meals a day and forced to eat garbage and household pets. Mexico shows that civilization can be frighteningly thin. Next article I have for you is off of Breitbart. As soon as the hamster gets it up here. And he's rolling along. ACLU, ACLU issues travel alert for Texas after sanctuary city ban. The American Civil Liberties Union and Governor Greg Abbott's signing of the nation's toughest sanctuary city law. ACLU tells people planning trip to Lone Star State to anticipate. Oops, hamster got a little too froggy there. Well, come on, hamster. Okay. The warning from the ACLU tells people planning a trip to the Lone Star State to anticipate the possible violation of their constitutional rights when stopped by law enforcement. The press release obtained by Breitbart, Texas, from the ACLU states, goal is to protect all Texans and all people traveling through Texas, regardless of their immigration status, from illegal harassment by law enforcement. And if we can get him to scroll it up a little more. Okay, said Lorella Priscilli, ACLU Director of Immigration Policy and Campaigns. Texas is a state with deep Mexican roots and home to immigrants from all walks of life. Many of us fit the racial profile that the police in Texas will use to enforce Trump's deportation force. We plan to fight this racist and wrong-headed law in the courts and in the streets until we defeat it. Everyone traveling in or to Texas needs to be aware of what's in store for them. Executive Director of ACLU of Texas. The Lone Star State will become a show me your papers state where every interaction with law enforcement can become or citizenship interrogation and potentially an illegal arrest. Governor Abbott signed the SB 4 into law Sunday night in a Facebook video carried live on Breitbart, Texas. Following the social media signing, the governor spoke with this reporter about the significance of the bill and the being spread about it by the left. Directly disputing the ACLU's Show Me Your Papers claim, the so-called controversial part of this law is what some label, and of course it jumps, as the Show Me Your Papers component, the Texas governor explained. And what everyone seems to get wrong is that they think that this provision was stricken down in the law. To the contrary, the provision in the Arizona law is stricter than the Texas law. The Arizona law required that law enforcement ask for papers. The Texas law does not require it. It allows it, so one difference. But despite that difference, the Arizona law was upheld by every U.S. Supreme Court justice, including the liberals, he said emphatically. So, the so-called controversial part of this law has been ruled on by the U.S. Supreme Court and upheld, the governor emphasized. The ACLU's claim of possible racial profiling ignored the fact that the law specifically prohibits such conduct by police. The new law also provides protections for crimes and witnesses to crimes not already afforded under the previous laws. Police officers are prohibited under the new law from asking about the immigration status of a crime victim or witness unless the immigration status is germane to the investigation, as in the case of human smuggling crimes. Abbott said nothing changes for law-abiding American citizens when they encounter a law enforcement officer. For American citizens, this bill has no impact on them whatsoever, and they have absolutely nothing to be concerned about, Abbott reassured. There is only one group of people that is targeted by this legislation. That's people who are in this country illegally, who have committed a violent crime and are subject to an ICE arrest. During the final debate on the Texas Senate floor, the bill's author, Senator Charles Perry, Republican of Lubbock, also responded to the so-called changes in law enforcement actions during public encounters. He said this bill doesn't change anything in this regard, and citizens and legal residents do not need to carry papers to prove they are here legally. Lawsuits on the constitutionality of the law, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton fired a preemptive strike, filing a lawsuit against individuals, the city of Austin, and others who have threatened legal action on the state's new law banning sanctuary cities. SB 4 is constitutional, lawful, and vital step in securing our borders, General Paxton said. Statement obtained by Breitbart, Texas. SB 4 guarantees cooperation among federal, state, and local law enforcement to protect Texans. Unfortunately, some municipalities and law enforcement agencies are unwilling to cooperate with the federal government and claim that SB 4 is unconstitutional. The next article is off of Breitbart. And it's coming up a little bit quicker here. Up here some. Barack Obama says eating more steaks can change. Mercy. I think somebody dropped him on his head when he was a baby. Let me get this up here so we can read it. Former President Barack Obama warned the world that more people on the planet were eating meat, causing a dramatic rise in climate emissions. As people want to increase meat consumption, turn is spiking the growth of greenhouse emissions coming out of the agricultural sector. Countries that were consuming more meat. And there is audio or video in this if you want to see it. Lord. The former president shared his views about the growing threat about food with his former chef Sam Cass at Food Innovation Summit in Milan. With the impact of cows and methane, Obama said, adding that to increase more meat consumption, that in turn is spiking the growth of greenhouse emissions coming out of the agricultural sectors. Obama explained, we're contributing to global pollution of methane gas emissions from cow herds. No matter what, we are going to see an increase in meat consumption, Obama said, pointing to developing economies in China and Vietnam. More advanced countries, Obama said, would have smaller steak and explore reductions to their meat consumption. That we are also going to have to find ways to produce protein in a more efficient way, he said. During the conversation, Obama argued with Cass about how many steaks he had cooked him. Cass said that he had probably cooked thousands of steaks for the president, but Obama interrupted. I don't think thousands, he protested. Well, hundreds maybe, Cass backtracked. I've been cooking for you for 10 years. That I'm not a vegetarian, Obama admitted, adding that he respected vegetarians but continued to eat meat. Next article is off of Breitbart. And we're waiting for the hamster. And the hamster's getting with program. Mexican cartel using armored trucks in war at Texas border. Trying to get it to scroll up here. Mexican cartel members are using armored trucks in their ongoing war for control of lucrative drug trafficking and human smuggling routes near the Texas border. Recently, state police officers seized a large truck outfitted with thick armor plating for firefights, called or monsters. According to the information provided to Breitbart, Texas by the government, police officers were patrolling the area near Tamaulipas when they came across an abandoned warehouse. Tamargo is immediately south of Rio Grande City, Texas. Pictures in this, if you'd like to pull it up to see the pictures. When authorities inspected the warehouse, they found a truck covered in armor plating as a makeshift combat vehicle. The truck had Texas license plates. It remains unclear if the vehicle was previously stolen. As Breitbart Texas reported, rival factions of the Gulf Cartel have gone to war for this region's lucrative drug territories. The fight spreading terror through, and well, then it jumps. The fight spreading terror through Reynosa as convoys of gunmen roamed the streets. Officials figures point to 20 individuals killed while 6 were injured in the ongoing violence. Authorities seized armored vehicles, SUVs, grenade, machine guns, and other weapons of violence. Off Breitbart. Actually, the next 2 articles are about MS-13. They're both off of Breitbart. 13 member deported to El Salvador. An illegal immigrant MS-13 gang member has been deported to El Salvador following multiple assault convictions and a murder charge. Grandiuk, age 35, member of the violent El Salvadorian MS-13 gang, which has now taken root across the United States, according to the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. I'm not sure how it's pronounced. Grandiuk, I guess. Name is. He was arrested in Washington, D.C. in May of 2001 and again in February of 2002 for assault charges with intent to commit robbery. The gang member was sentenced to 10 years in prison for the crimes. Back in February of 2011, he was convicted of first-degree murder but had the case dropped after requesting a new trial. Last year, he was handed over to ICE officials after having the murder charges dismissed. Subsequently ordered for deportation by an immigration judge. The immigrant is finally back in El Salvador after more than a decade in the United States. Unlawfully entered, or he unlawfully entered the United States and once here continued to violate U.S. laws by assaulting innocent victims. ICE Washington, D.C. Field Director Matthew Monroe said in a statement, as a result of his actions, he has been removed to his home country of El Salvador from Virginia to Pennsylvania and then flown to Alexandria, Louisiana, where ICE's Air Operations Unit illegal immigrant to San Salvador International Airport in El Salvador. Out of here. The next one is off of Breitbart. Well, get it to scroll up a little bit. 13 member arrested for alleged shooting. To be sent back where he came from. Arrested the member of an MS-13 for his suspected connection to shooting that took place in August of 2016. Barahona, age 19, was arrested Sunday evening in Eisenhower Park for his alleged connection to a shooting in 2016 that left 2 men injured. County, ABC New York reported. Were in a yard with three others when the shooting took place. One of the men, a 20-year-old, was shot in the hand and foot. The other, a 37-year-old, was shot in the stomach. Attack. According to Newsday, police have indicated that is a member of the notoriously violent MS-13 street gang. 5 counts of attempted murder and 1 count of criminal of a weapon. Eisenhower Park are both located on Long Island, where federal authorities, along with state police, have started targeting MS-13. In 2017, United States Attorney General Jeff Sessions visited Long Island, where he gave a speech singling out the violent street gang. The motto is kill, rape, and control, Sessions said. I have a message to the gangs that are targeting our young people. You. Long Island came in response to the murders of 4 teens in the area that are believed to be the work of MS-13. The article. Headlines, it says 10 billion federal lawsuit for political meddling. An altogether controversial figure, George Soros, subject of a $10 billion lawsuit, a racketeer billionaire for meddling in the affairs of a sovereign African nation, purely for personal reasons, in what critics say typifies his modus operandi. That first sentence, yes, that's billion, with an emphatic capital B. Reports the 86-year-old financier and manager of a global network of nonprofits will be forced by BSG Resources lawsuit to answer for manipulating an economics of Guinea for his own benefit. Soros was motivated solely by malice, B states in the suit, as there was no economic interest. Despite Soros' often contentious dealings and reputation as a pompous busybody, last month's filing in New York federal court has thus far largely escaped the spotlight. Companies controlled by Israeli mining magnate Benny Steinmetz sued fellow billionaire George Soros, claiming he cost them at least $10 billion through a defamation campaign that stripped them of their rights to an iron ore deposit in Guinea and other business opportunities around the world, Bloomberg reported. Funded law firms, transparency groups, investigators, and government officials in Guinea, in a coordinated effort, Resources Limited lost the rights to the Simandou deposit. BSGR said in a complaint filed April the 14th in Manhattan federal court. As opposed to innumerable civilians directly affected by Soros' notoriously shady string pulling, the lawsuit originates with the billionaire's peers who claim money's influenced bilked them billions as claimed. To Soros' success, as well as his active passion promotion of Israeli life, business, and culture are anathema. The lawsuit states Soros is also well known for his longstanding animus toward the state of Israel. Arrested in December of 2016 over allegations he and BSGR forked over millions in bribes to government officials for mining rights on Simandou. Charges had been based on fabricated reports by Soros-funded companies, BSGR, in its suit. Bloomberg notes Mamadi Toure, the 4th wife of the former president of Guinea, who implicated BSGR and Steinmetz, received $50,000 from an advisor to President Alpha Condé and $80,000 from an agent or affiliate of Soros, according to the complaint. States the lawsuit, Soros's financial clout gave him power over Guinea's processes of government, then thoroughly abused, and only as a matter of anonymity, since the obscenely wealthy globalists stood to gain nothing economically in the Western African nation. Iron ore from the untapped Simandou is thought to be of the highest grade, with reserves estimated to comprise over 2 to comprise over 2 billion tons. Legal brawl amongst tycoons a matter of grave financial consequence, at least to those years of allegations and accusations of underhanded business affairs between BSGR and Soros had not led the company to take direct action until now. In its complaint, BSGR alleges that Soros was driven by grudge dating back to 1998 in Russia and his alleged hostility towards Israel. The Hungarian American regularly disguises shady political maneuvers as humanitarian in nature when the tends to be true. Among many other entities, Soros's Open Society Foundations, an umbrella over multiple organizations, has long been suspected of funding and training political movements toward ends globalists. Even officials from his homeland of Hungary affirm this, as top education official, Minister of Human Capacities, asserting recently, as quoted by Fox, "We are committed to use legal means at our disposal to stop pseudo civil society spy groups such as the ones funded by George Soros." Soros reaches deep into personal financial reserves during U.S. elections, often spending ample funds for desirable candidates in every level, from to presidential hopefuls, and frequently bequeaths millions to contenders on both sides of the aisle. In fact, Soros' undeniable influence over American politics will be central to BSGR's case against him, as the suit claims sway over the U.S. Department of Justice with the billionaire on the bribery issue. Former Obama-era DOJ attorney told Fox the system had been at Soros's beck and call, noting he had been instrumental in reforming police procedures and in bringing about changes to voter ID laws. Outlet Soros's organizations in the U.S. were instrumental in shaping DOJ policy under the Obama administration. Americans do not understand the extent to which Soros fuels this anti-constitutional, anti-American agenda. Soros told Fox lawsuit it is try it again. A spokesman for Soros told Fox the lawsuit is a diversionary tactic for the company, as BSGR only wishes to deflect from its own wrongdoing. Whatever the ultimate outcome of the BSGR lawsuit, it's clear the planet can no longer stomach the parlor game effects when meddling in the affairs of sovereign nation entities and individuals. In the age of information and with the wealth of information available online, bottomless pockets like Soros can no longer pull puppet strings somewhere, taking notice and moving sever the ties for good. Off Breitbart. And we get to scroll up a little bit. It says Ted Cruz cleans Sally Yates' clock, and here's why. And I have several articles here about Sally Yates. My goodness, her name is just all over the news today. Good golly. Hearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee, Senator Ted Cruz, Republican of Texas, exposed former acting Attorney General Sally Yates' ignorance of the law and the partisan nature of her decision to refuse to enforce President Donald Trump's executive order suspending travel from several terror-prone countries. One would not know that, which thinks Yates won the exchange, but Cruz proved his case decisively. In short, Cruz brought up the law that authorized the executive order, and Yates did not recognize it, by referring to another law which does not supersede the first. She then tried to argue that the order was unconstitutional, but Cruz pointed out it was a partisan one, driven by her own policy views. She then claimed no court would enforce the order, which is contradicted by the fact that one actually did. Yates won the exchange because she was well prepared with a set of talking points and offered a snappy response. That shows how desperate Democrats are to salvage something out of the hearing, which failed to produce any new evidence to back up their Russian conspiracy theories. urgently they need champions. It does not change the fact that Cruz was completely correct and Yates was completely wrong. Here is a more detailed explanation with a transcript of the relevant portions of the exchange, as well as a video. Who posted it, called Sally Yates owns Cruz during a Russian hearing. Cruz says, well, are you familiar with 8 U.S.C. section 1182? Not off the top of my head, no. Now think about that for a moment. The government's chief lawyer was unfamiliar with the law that was the basis for the executive order and the basis of government's arguments in court in every one of the cases that she later cited. To a lay observer, USC section 1182 may sound like asking about a minor league baseball player's batting average in 1987, but a senior lawyer in the issue should know exactly what Cruz was talking about, especially as the statute is referring in the second version of the executive order. Yates later said she is familiar with that law, but the fact that she did not recognize it suggests that she was so biased that she had not bothered to familiarize herself in any detail with the legal argument on the other side of the issue. Well, it's the binding statutory authority for the executive order that you refused to implement and that led to your termination. Relevant and not a terribly obscure statute. By express text of the statute, it says finds that the entry of any alien or any class of aliens into the United States would be detrimental to the interests of the United States. Proclamation, and for such period as he shall deem necessary, suspend the entry of all aliens or any class of aliens as immigrants, or impose on the entry of aliens any restrictions he may deem appropriate. That authorization, and I am familiar with that, and I'm also familiar with an additional provision of the INA, that's the Immigration and Nationality Act, that says shall receive preference or be discriminated against a visa because of race, nationality, or birth. I believe it was promulgated after the statute that you just quoted, and that's been part of the discussion with the courts with respect to the INA, is whether this statute trumps the first one that you just described. The law Yates cited was passed in 1965 as an amendment to the law Cruz cited, which was passed in 1952. There are some lawyers who argue that the 1965 amendment supersedes the provisions Cruz cited. However, no president has ever treated the law that way. In fact, every single Democratic president since then has used a provision that Cruz cited specifically to exclude or restrict travelers from specific countries in the United States. An essay in Time magazine, of all places, pointed out that some this year, most notably, President Jimmy Carter barred Iranians from traveling to the United States with rare exceptions using the same provisions that Cruz cited. Yates' argument also makes no sense. If the U.S. cannot discriminate among immigrants on the basis of nationality, that would invalidate federal immigration policy as a whole. This is intent. And Yates says, not an INA concern here, was a constitutional concern. Whether or not the executive order, Constitution, specifically with the Establishment Clause, with equal protection and due process. The executive order was unconstitutional is at best debatable and most likely just wrong. Even if he had opted for an explicit Muslim ban, as he suggested he would after the Paris terror attacks in 2015, before amending that policy later, that would also have been constitutional, as Breitbart News pointed out at the time. Already discriminate on the basis of religion, both for and against particular faiths. There is no doubt the arguments you laid out are the arguments that we can expect litigants to bring, partisan litigants who disagree with the policy decision of the president. I would note on January 27th of 2017, the Department of Justice issued an official determination by the Office of Legal Counsel that the executive order, and I'll quote, the purposed order is approved with respect to form and legality. That's a determination from the OLC on January 27th that it's legal. You determined, using your own words, that although the OLC opted on legality, it had not addressed whether it was wise or just. Cruz pointed out exactly why Yates deserved to be fired. Her job was not to make that argument against the order, but to enforce the order. There's a chance that it would be found unconstitutional as long as there was some basis to claim that it was constitutional and lawful. Legal counsel determined it was. The Obama administration took many actions that were unconstitutional and which the Department of Justice nevertheless defended to the hilt. RB versus Noel Canning in 2014, for example, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled unanimously that President Barack Obama had violated the Constitution by to himself the power to declare when the Senate was in recess for the purpose of making presidential appointments. Did Sally Yates offer to resign when the Department of Justice moved ahead with defending that hopeless case? Not. Yates says that in the same direct that I was not convinced it was lawful. So I made the point that the office of the OLC at the face of the document and again makes a determination as to whether there is some set of circumstances under that executive order would be enforceable. There was, in fact, such a set of circumstances as proven by the decision by a federal court in Massachusetts to deny a temporary restraining order against the executive order. The judge found that the president has exercised his broad authority under the S 1182F and added that this court declines to encroach upon the delicate policy of judgment inherent in immigration decisions. Democrats do not like to cite that case for obvious reasons. Yates says, do not look outside of the force of the document, and this particular instance, talking particularly about a fundamental issue of religious freedom, not the interpretation of some arcane statute, but religious freedom. It was appropriate for us to look at the intent behind the president's action, and the intent is laid out in his statements. Note how Yates dismissed the law that was the basis for the executive order as some arcane statute. She also decided that the president's statements on the campaign trail, statements that he later walked back, were somehow within her purview. She cited religious freedom, but again, she did resign when the Department of Justice was called upon to defend Obama's intrusions on religious freedom, the Little Sisters of the Poor case. She did not. Cruz revealed that Sally Yates did not care about the law, did not care about her oath, did not care about the Constitution as much as she cared about taking a political stand against the new president. On this, if you want to that. The next article is off of View. And we'll wait for the hamster to get it up here. See him working on it. He's not doing a very good job. We'll give him a, that helps him. Well, come on. The wheel is a spinning. Well, we'll just go to the next one, see if that, we'll come back to that one. They're all about Sally Yates. I don't think it matters which one we hit first. It says, watch GOP Senator nail Sally Yates to the wall. Who appointed you to the United States Supreme Court? Former acting Sally Yates thought she was going to testify about supposed Russian interference in the 2016 election, but she likely got more than she bargained for when Senator John Kennedy, Republican of Louisiana, took the mic to question Yates on her refusal to defend President Trump's order temporarily banning travel from several key terrorist hotspots across the globe, and ultimately got the Obama appointee fired. Yates told Kennedy that she believed any argument the Justice Department would have to make in its defense would not be grounded in truth. We would have to argue that it had nothing to do with religion. When asked whether or not there was another way to defend the order, Yates responded with her belief that the order's intent was to discriminate against Muslims who wanted to come to the United States. Then Louisiana senator went in for the proverbial kill shot. Does an act of Congress or an executive order become unconstitutional? Kennedy asked. I can look at a statute and say, I think that's unconstitutional. Does that make it unconstitutional? From Yates, Kennedy said, and I don't mean any disrespect, who appointed you to the United States Supreme Court? The contention that it's the Attorney General's responsibility to say no if they believe an order is unlawful, and that's what I did. I believe you believe what you're saying, said Kennedy. Maybe so, but that doesn't make it constitutional. There's a video of this exchange if you would like to pull it up for your entertainment. We will go back to this other one and see if the hamster's doing any good getting it up here. I had all these up a while ago. I don't understand why he's having an issue with it this time around, but let me try something else here and see if this will do it. I don't know. Well, so far nothing. See if we can get another one going here. I'm batting 1,000. Here I've got one. President Trump's threatening a witness. CNN is disturbed by Trump Yates tweet. I wanted to read before this, but I'm not getting it on the screen. It has to do with Trump's tweets. The former acting Attorney General Sally Yates expected to testify Monday afternoon before Senate subcommittee. President Donald Trump posed his own question about classified information being leaked to newspapers. The query was enough to send CNN legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin claiming Trump crossed the line of expected president who was threatening a witness reach. It just shows how much the norms of behavior have changed, Toobin said Monday. The idea of the President of the United States essentially threatening a witness. He's basically accusing her of leaking. We have never had that before. Video of that, if you'd like to pull it up and watch it. It says, never mind that Trump simply asked a question on social media. We've never had presidents who did this kind of thing, Toobin added. The idea that the president, guy who's in charge of the Justice Department, is threatening a witness is kind of disturbing. He's disturbed by that. It's almost guaranteed Toobin isn't going to like rather humorous tweet from a parody account of the White House press secretary, Sean Spicer. There's an editor's note here. It says, original post made a boneheaded mistake of identifying a parody account is belonging to White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer. Accordingly, Sean Spicer put out this tweet, says, hopefully Sally Yates' Senate testimony light on how Putin convinced Hillary to ignore Wisconsin. On Yates' testimony to rejuvenate the stalled narrative about so-called collusion between Trump campaign officials and Russia, as one social media user suggested. That one puts out the tweet saying, Russia, Russia, Russia. Out Sally Yates and try and defibrillate the Russian narrative. We have that article. This one, it says, boom, Trump alleges Hillary lackey Sally Yates leaked classified info to liberal media. You just can't make this stuff up. Fox News reported that Hillary's loyalist and former acting Attorney General Sally Yates was invited by the Senate to testify against President Donald Trump in regards to Russia tampering with the 2016 election. Former acting Sally Yates, who warned the Trump administration about between one of its key advisors in Russia, will testify Monday before Senate Judiciary Committee investigating Russia interference in the 2016 presidential election. It's the first time Yates will get a chance to speak publicly about the concerns she raised. The hearing is expected to fill in key details in the chain of events that led former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn's resignation. Yates was fired from her post as acting Attorney General after failing to support President Donald Trump's executive order banning immigrants from 7 terror-ridden countries. Did not report is that Yates was referred to in an email released by WikiLeaks before the election as one of 4 known loyalists of candidate Hillary Clinton. That information, if you want to take a look at it. On Monday, President Trump alleged the leaker of classified information to the liberal media. It says General Flynn was given the highest security clearance by the Obama administration, but the fake news seldom likes talking about that. Ask Sally Yates under oath if she knows how classified information got into the newspaper soon after she explained it to the White House counsel. Republicans will listen to their president. And 2 articles. Operate with me here. Not so far. Well, I guess if you want to read those, you'll have to pull them up and take a look at them yourself. The one is BizPac Review. Acting Attorney General Sally Yates opened can of worms. Now look suing DOJ emails. Well, here it is. It actually did come up. Maybe you just wanted me to read that. It says the emails that were sent and received by Sally Yates when she was President Trump's acting Attorney General are being requested in a lawsuit. Judicial Watch filed Freedom of Information Act lawsuit on Monday seeking access to Yates' government account during her 10-day tenure in the Trump administration. The conservative watchdog group is requesting Yates' email from January 21st to January 31st of this year. In Russian surveillance scandal and her lawless effort to thwart President Trump's immigration executive order, Sally Yates' short tenure as acting Attorney General was remarkably troubling, of Judicial Watch said in a statement. It might provide a window into how the anti-Trump deep state justice system. Trump fired Yates on January 30th after she refused to support the president's temporary travel ban, advising the Justice Department not to back the order in a memo. She attempted to defend that decision Monday during a Senate subcommittee hearing investigating Russian interference in the 2016 election. He was Deputy Attorney General from January 2015 and became Trump's interim Attorney General pending the confirmation of Senator Jeff Sessions in January after Trump's inauguration. She told the Senate subcommittee on Monday that she had warned the White House counsel Don McGahn on January the 26th about former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. could be blackmailed by Russia due to his contacts with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak, his position on February 13th. Ahead of Yates' testimony Monday, President Trump tweeted that she should be asked if information was leaked to the press with Magan in January. Judicial Watch filed a lawsuit, and let me hear. Judicial Watch filed its lawsuit following FOIA request on February the 1st. So that's that article. Now let's see if this last one with me. And it's not doing what it's supposed to do here. Well, nope, I'm not getting this one to cooperate. This one says Trump offers insight in anticipation of Sally Yates' testimony. So I think it's probably just more of the same stuff that I've already read to you, but pull that up and read it for yourself. The URL is in the description of this video. So, even with my failing hamster, a couple days has been failing miserably in getting these articles up for me. If you like what I'm trying to do here, give it a thumbs up. Share it on your social media so everybody gets to hear most of the news. And haven't done that. That way you'll stay somewhat informed. Have a great day.